My name is Diana Cho. I'm 29 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've been the daughter who fixed things quietly and never asked for credit. I'm the one who left our small Ohio town at 18, got a supply chain degree, clawed my way up to procurement director at a mid-size restaurant group in Chicago, and called home every Sunday without fail. When my parents told me the family diner needed a full renovation or it would lose its lease, I wired $65,000 in 2 transfers without losing a night of sleep. I thought I was saving a piece of our family's history. I didn't know I was buying myself out of it. The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I was at my desk reviewing vendor contracts when my phone buzzed with a name I recognized. Marco Esposito, our company's shared equipment distributor. The same one I'd personally brought in to outfit my family's kitchen 6 months earlier. "Hey, Marco," I said. Little early for a check-in. His voice was careful in a way that made me set down my coffee. "Diana, I wanted to give you a heads up before things got awkward. Your brother called me this morning. He said the account for Cho's Diner is transferring to his name. He wanted to renegotiate the contract terms without the internal discount structure." I didn't say anything for a moment. "He said you donated your involvement," Marco continued, his words, "that you gifted the renovation and stepped back from the business side. He said going forward, the family is handling everything directly." I leaned back in my chair and stared at the water stain on my office ceiling that facilities had been promising to fix since October. "Marco," I said slowly, "who do you think signed the original contracts?" "You did. And who holds the preferred vendor agreement that gets your equipment into that kitchen at 40% below market rate?" "You do. Through your corporate umbrella." There was a pause on the line that I think we both needed. "So, my brother called you to cut me out of an arrangement that only exists because of my professional relationships. That's why I'm calling you first," he said. "I didn't feel right going forward without talking to you." I thanked him, hung up, and sat very still for about 90 seconds. Then I opened my email and started reading. I want to tell you something about how my mind works before I go further, because it matters for what I did next. I am not an emotional decision maker. I'm the person who gets called in when a restaurant is hemorrhaging money and no one can figure out where. I find the leak. I trace it back. I fix it. Feelings are real to me, but I've learned to file them away until the numbers are handled. So when I felt that cold drop in my stomach sitting at my desk in Chicago, I didn't cry. I started auditing. I pulled up the shared folder I'd created when the renovation started. The original scope documents. The vendor onboarding emails. The permits my contact at the city zoning office had pushed through faster than normal because I'd referred her firm 3 corporate clients. The equipment lease agreements. The linen and supply subscriptions for the new menu rollout. The POS system I'd gotten our company's tech vendor to install at a fraction of the retail cost. Every single one of them had my name on it, my signature, my relationships, my professional credibility on the line. Then I opened my email search and typed my brother's name. The thread that came back first was from my mother's account, forwarded automatically to my folder because I was the original recipient on the chain and our system flags all related correspondence. It was from 2 weeks ago. The subject line was simply, "Transition Plan." My mother had written to our family's accountant, "We are officially moving the diner into Kevin's name as planned. Diana's contribution should be recorded as a personal gift to the family, not a business investment. She has her career in Chicago. This place is Kevin's future. Please make sure the new ownership documents reflect only Kevin and his wife." The accountant had replied, "Understood. Should Diana be notified?" My mother's response was 4 words. "She knows how we feel." I read that 4 times. She knows how we feel. Not she agrees. Not she's been consulted. She knows how we feel. As though my awareness of their preferences was the same thing as my consent. I kept scrolling. There was a second email, this one from my father to my brother, sent the same week. "Kevin, once the paperwork clears, reach out to Diana's vendors and introduce yourself as the new owner. Just be straightforward. She set things up as a favor to us. They'll understand the transition. You don't need to go through her." I sat there in my Chicago office, 33 floors above Michigan Avenue, and felt the particular cold of someone who has just understood something they cannot ununderstand. My parents had a plan. They'd had it for a while. My $65,000 wasn't an investment they intended to honor. It was a donation they'd already spent and closed the book on. And my brother, who I'd taught to ride a bike and driven to his SATs, had been making phone calls to my professional contacts to quietly remove me from my own work. I want to ask you something before I tell you what I did next. If you discovered that your family had been moving pieces around behind your back for months, treating your money like it was already theirs, and your involvement like it was a problem to manage, would you confront them right away? Or would you do what I did, which was spend one very quiet evening making sure I understood every single thing I had the power to do before I made a single phone call? Because here's what I understood by the time I closed my laptop that night. The kitchen equipment was under a vendor agreement that listed my employer as the guarantor and me as the authorized contact. The POS system was a corporate account tied to my work email. The specialty food distributor I'd brought in, the one who'd given my parents access to the same premium suppliers our restaurant group used, that relationship existed entirely because of my name and my decade of industry trust. The linen subscription, the hood cleaning service, the grease trap maintenance contract, all of it ran through my professional network. My brother could call those vendors all he wanted. What he couldn't do was replace the credibility that made those terms possible in the first place. I also understood something else. My parents had told the accountant to classify my contribution as a personal gift. In our state, gifts to a family business with no written agreement have no legal weight. I had no ownership stake. I had no documented investment. I had $65,000 in outgoing wire transfers and a folder full of contracts that only existed because of me. They had been very careful. I was going to have to be more careful. The next morning I drove to Ohio. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. My parents' neighborhood is exactly the kind of place where everyone waves from driveways and nobody says what they actually mean. I pulled up to the house at 10 on a Wednesday and sat in the car for a moment, looking at the front door my father had repainted twice in my childhood. I thought about how many times I'd walked through it carrying good news I'd downplayed because I didn't want anyone to feel uncomfortable about the gap between my life and theirs. All the promotions I'd soft-pedaled, the bonus I'd never mentioned, the industry award I'd received last spring that I'd described to my mother as just a small thing, a plaque. I was done soft-pedaling. My mother opened the door before I reached the porch. Her face went through 3 expressions in about 2 seconds. Surprise, then something guilty, then a practiced warmth that I recognized as performance. "Diana, we weren't expecting you." "I know," I said. That was the point. My father was in the kitchen. My brother wasn't there, which I'd expected. He and his wife lived 20 minutes away. My parents wouldn't have called him yet because they didn't know why I was there. I sat down at the dining table, the one I'd eaten at for 18 years, and I put my phone face up on the surface. I had the email thread open. "I'd like to understand the transition plan," I said. My mother looked at my father. My father pulled out a chair slowly. "Diana, we were going to talk to you about this." "When?" I asked. Because the accountant was already notified 2 weeks ago. Marco from the equipment distributor got a call from my brother yesterday. The timeline on this plan suggests the conversation was scheduled for after the paperwork cleared. "It's not what you think," my mother said. "We're not cutting you out. You have your life. You have your career. The diner is a small family thing." "It's a small family thing that I put $65,000 into," I said. "That I spent 6 months sourcing vendors for. That is currently running on equipment and systems and supply agreements that exist because of my professional relationships." "You said it was a gift," my father said. "You said you didn't want anything in return." "I said I didn't want to be paid back in cash," I replied. "I didn't say I wanted to be erased." My mother's voice shifted into the register I'd heard my entire life, the one that was softer but somehow more cutting. "Lauren, sweetheart, Kevin needs this. He doesn't have what you have. You've built something for yourself. You're successful. You don't need a diner in Ohio. Kevin is building a family here. He needs something to anchor him." I noticed she'd called me Lauren. My mother does that when she's not fully present in the conversation, slips back to an old name, an old version of me she finds easier to manage. My name is Diana, I said, and I've heard that logic my entire life. I have enough so I shouldn't mind giving more. Kevin needs it so I should want less. But I need you to hear me say this clearly. I did not give $65,000 and 6 months of professional capital so that my brother could inherit the result and my name could be removed from the record. My father leaned forward. What do you want, Diana? A plaque on the wall. An ownership percentage. We're not a corporation. I want what was agreed to, I said, which was that I was a partner in this renovation, not a donor, not a background character. A partner who would be involved in the future of what we built. My mother spread her hands. But you're in Chicago. Yes, I said. And the vendors I brought in are also not in Ohio. That hasn't stopped them from serving the diner every week. Distance isn't the issue. We want Kevin to feel like it's his, my father said. If your name is on everything, he'll always feel like he's managing your project. I looked at my father for a long moment. Then I said the thing I'd driven 3 hours to say. Then he should have funded his own project. The room went quiet. I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually think about it before you answer. When you've given everything you have, your money, your time, your professional reputation, to help someone you love, and then you find out they've been quietly rerouting the credit to someone else, is that a misunderstanding? Or is that a choice? Because there's a difference. Misunderstandings are accidents. What I was looking at was a plan. A careful, deliberate, months-in-the-making plan to reclassify my contribution as a gift and hand the result to my brother before I noticed what was happening. I drove back to Chicago that night. I didn't say much on my way out. I told my parents I needed to think. My mother said she hoped I wouldn't do anything dramatic. My father said he was sure we'd find a way to honor everyone's role. I said nothing. Back in my apartment, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and wrote out every vendor relationship connected to the diner. 14 in total. I put a star next to the ones where my name was the primary contact. 11 stars. Then I made a list of what would happen to the diner's current operation if those relationships changed. The commercial refrigeration units were on a service agreement that required my corporate discount code to maintain the quarterly rate. Without it, the cost would jump by 60%. The food distributor had given my parents access to Tier 2 pricing, the kind reserved for accounts that moved significant volume through a parent company umbrella. Standalone, the diner didn't qualify. The POS system was on a corporate plan under my work account. Cancel that account. The terminals either go dark or revert to retail pricing with a new setup fee. The hood cleaning service was a favor from a contact I'd known for 8 years. Not a contract. A favor. One phone call from me could end it. I'm not telling you this to sound powerful. I'm telling you because I want you to understand what my parents didn't seem to have considered. They thought my contribution was already past tense, a check that had cleared, a project that was finished. What they hadn't accounted for was that my involvement wasn't a gift they could unwrap and put on a shelf. It was infrastructure. Living, ongoing, dependent infrastructure. And it ran through me. I called Marco first. Marco, I said. I need to update some account structures. He already knew. Of course he did. I think he'd been expecting this call since Tuesday. Here's what I need you to do, I told him. The Cho's Diner account needs to be converted to an independent external account, no more internal discount tier. The existing equipment lease remains under the corporate agreement until the term expires in 8 months. At that point, they can renew at market rate or return the units. No automatic rollover, no courtesy extension. Done, he said quietly. Do you want me to notify them? I'll do it, I said. I worked through the list over 2 days. Each call was professional. Each one was measured. I wasn't angry on the phone. Anger is expensive, and it makes you sloppy. I was precise. I told each vendor the same thing. The account structure was changing. I was no longer the authorized contact. The preferred pricing associated with my professional relationship would be phased out per the terms of each individual agreement. The food distributor was the one that stung the most to make, because I'd personally vouched for the diner's volume to get them that pricing. The rep I spoke to had been a colleague of mine for 4 years. She was kind about it. "I hope whatever happened gets worked out," she said. "It already is," I told her. On the 3rd day, I called my brother. My brother answered on the 2nd ring, which told me our parents had already warned him I'd been to the house. He led with offense, which is what he always does when he's nervous. "Diana, I've been waiting for you to call. You really scared Mom and Dad showing up like that." "I'm sure I did," I said. "I heard you've been reaching out to my vendors." "They're the diner's vendors," he said. "They're vendors I brought into the diner's orbit through my professional relationships," I said. "There's a difference, and I think on some level you know that. Otherwise, you would have called me before you called Marco." He was quiet for a second. "Mom and Dad said you were stepping back, that you wanted us to have it." I told them I didn't need to be paid back in cash. I said that once, about the loan structure, in a conversation about interest rates. I did not say I wanted to be removed from the business, cut off the vendor accounts, and listed as a donor in the legal paperwork. "Did they tell you that part? About the accountant?" Another pause, longer this time. "No," he said. "They didn't mention the accountant." And here was the moment I'd been waiting for without knowing I was waiting for it, because I heard something shift in my brother's voice. Not guilt exactly, not yet, but the particular stillness of someone who has just realized they've been working from incomplete information. "Kevin," I said, "I'm not calling to fight with you. I want you to know what's happening so you can make decisions with the full picture. The vendor structure you've been trying to transition into your name? Most of it is tied to my professional standing, not the diner's independent credit. Over the next several weeks, those agreements are going to revert to market terms. That means your operating costs are going to increase significantly." He exhaled. "By how much?" I gave him the number. I'd already done the math. The silence after I said it was a specific kind of silence. The kind where someone is recalculating a future they thought was already settled. "Diana, what do I do?" he asked. And the thing that broke me a little was that he sounded, in that moment, genuinely lost. Not entitled, not defensive, just a younger brother who'd been handed a situation he hadn't fully understood, and was only now seeing the real shape of it. "That's between you and Mom and Dad," I said. "But I'd start by asking them why they didn't tell you any of this before they made the plan. I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself when you answer. If you found out that someone you loved had been kept in the dark by your parents and used as the vehicle to push you out, would you blame them? Or would you direct your anger at the people who built the plan?" Because standing in that situation, I had to be very careful about where I put what I was feeling. My brother hadn't written those emails. He hadn't called the accountant. He'd been told a version of events that made him look like the natural heir and me look like a generous bystander who'd already moved on. That's not the same as being innocent. But it's not the same as being the architect, either. The family group chat became very active over the next 48 hours. I watched it without responding. My mother sent long messages about unity and family loyalty and the sacrifices parents make. My father sent shorter ones, more direct, less emotional, more pointed. A cousin weighed in with thoughts that were clearly based on a version of the story that had been filtered through my parents. My brother was quiet, which I noticed. Then my phone rang with a number I hadn't expected. It was my aunt, my mother's older sister, a woman who had spent 40 years watching my family from a careful distance and rarely commented on anything directly. She called me on a Tuesday evening when I was eating leftovers at my kitchen counter. "I heard what happened," she said. I braced myself. "Your mother is telling everyone you're punishing Kevin for your own insecurities. I want you to know I don't believe that." I didn't say anything. "I've watched your parents lean on you since you were 22 years old," she continued. "Every time there was a problem, it was Diana will help. Diana will figure it out. Diana can handle it. And every time you helped, they'd tell everyone else that it was a family effort. I never said anything because it wasn't my place. But you should know that someone who was watching understood what was happening. I felt something in my chest that I hadn't expected to feel, which was relief. Not vindication. Just relief. The specific relief of having a witness. I'm not trying to destroy anything, I told her. I just need them to understand that my involvement was real. That I'm a person, not a resource. I know that, she said. Make sure you don't let them make this about your ambition or your ego. The story they want to tell is that you're the successful one who can't let her little brother have something. Don't give them material for that story. I thanked her and stayed on the phone longer than I meant to. 10 days after the vendor calls, my father requested a meeting. Not at their house this time, not on their terms. He asked if I'd come home. I said I'd meet them at a neutral restaurant downtown. He agreed, which surprised me, because agreeing to my terms about location was already different from how things usually went. They were there when I arrived. My mother and father on one side of a booth, my brother on the other, alone. His wife wasn't there. I noticed that too. I sat down next to my brother, which I think caught everyone off guard. My father started. The operating costs came in, he said, from the new vendor quotes. I nodded. It's not sustainable at market rate, he said. Not at the volume we're running. I know. My mother looked at me with something that might have been softness if it weren't working so hard to also be a negotiation. Diana, we made a mistake. We should have been transparent with you from the beginning. We thought we were making it simple for everyone. We didn't think about how it would feel to you. I want to address that word, I said, feel. Because the thing that happened to me wasn't primarily about feelings. It was about facts. My name was removed from business records without my knowledge. My professional relationships were contacted without my permission. My contribution was reclassified without my consent. Those are not matters of feelings. Those are matters of conduct. My father clasped his hands on the table. What do you want, Diana? I looked at him, and then I looked at my brother, and then I said the thing I'd actually been thinking about for 10 days. I want a documented role. Not ownership, not control, not a plaque. A documented advisory role with a clear record of my contribution. I want the vendor relationships handled through me as an acknowledged partner, not as an invisible back channel. And I want it put in writing that going forward, any major decisions about the business are made with my input. Not my approval. My input. I'm not asking to run the diner from Chicago. I'm asking to be a person whose stake in this place is visible and real. My mother started to say something about how paperwork felt cold for a family situation. I held up one hand. The accountant's email about classifying my $65,000 as a gift felt cold too, I said, but you sent it anyway. She closed her mouth. My brother spoke up then, and this was the moment that I think actually changed something. He'd been quiet through most of the meeting, and when he spoke, his voice was careful in a way I hadn't heard from him in years. I didn't know about the emails, he said. Not the full picture. Mom and Dad told me you were happy to help and that you wanted to stay in the background. I took that at face value because I wanted to. I wanted to believe I was inheriting this place clean. I knew on some level that your connections were making things cheaper, but I didn't ask how much cheaper because I didn't want to know. That was wrong, and I'm sorry. That apology was not nothing. After a week of my family's group chat being full of narratives about my ambition and my inability to let things go, hearing my brother say I was wrong with no qualifications around it was worth more than the meeting itself. I told them what I was willing to do. I wasn't pulling the vendor relationships permanently. I was willing to maintain them under a structure that documented my role. The equipment lease would run its natural course, and I'd help negotiate a fair renewal. The food distributor relationship could continue if we drafted a simple letter of understanding that acknowledged my introductory role. The POS account I'd migrate to a co-authorized structure, so my brother had full access, but my professional backing remained intact. In exchange, I wanted what I'd asked for. Documentation. Acknowledgement. A seat at the table when decisions were being made about the place I'd helped rebuild. My father said it seemed reasonable. My mother said she wished it hadn't come to this. I told her it had only come to this because the alternative was pretending I didn't exist. She didn't have a response to that. I think that was the most honest moment we'd had in years. Here's what I want you to understand about the months that followed, because I think people expect these stories to end in one of two ways. Either the family mends everything perfectly, and everyone is closer than before, Or the person walks away and never looks back. Real life is neither of those things. My parents are learning what it means to acknowledge contribution out loud. My mother still sometimes catches herself framing things in ways that minimize my role, and I still sometimes have to redirect it. My father has gotten better at saying Diana arranged this connection, not just things worked out well. My brother and I have developed a different kind of relationship than we had before, more equal, more direct. He calls me when something at the diner is unclear. I give him real answers, instead of soft ones. His wife and I are cordial. We're not close. That might change, or it might not. The diner is doing well, better than it was before the renovation, actually. We added 2 local catering accounts that came through a referral I made, and I'm credited for them in the business records by name. That matters to me, not for the ego of it, but because when something is written down, it exists in a way that a feeling never quite does. I want to leave you with the thing I wish someone had told me before I turned 25 and started writing checks to fix every problem in a zip code I'd left behind. Being generous is not the same as being invisible. These are 2 different choices. You can give your time, your money, your professional capital, your relationships, your expertise, and you can do all of that with genuine love and a full heart. But love without a record is just a story that whoever controls the narrative gets to tell. And in families where one person is always the capable one, the fixer, the high earner, the one who handles it, that narrative almost always gets written in a way that makes your contributions feel inevitable rather than chosen. They weren't inevitable. I chose every single one of them. And the moment I stopped choosing them, everyone in that family had to reckon with what had actually been holding things together. If you are the strong one in your family, the one who wires money without blinking, the one who makes one phone call and solves a problem that would take everyone else 6 months, I want you to hear this. Your strength is not a reason you don't get to have terms. Your success is not a reason your presence is optional. Your capability is not a subscription service your family gets to cancel when it becomes inconvenient for someone else's story. You are allowed to be generous and respected at the same time. If the people around you treat those 2 things as incompatible, that is worth paying very close attention to. So I want to know, have you ever been in a situation where your family treated your contribution as a given while quietly arranging credit for someone else? And if you were standing where I was standing, would you have made those phone calls? Or would you have let it go and told yourself it wasn't worth the disruption? Tell me in the comments. I read everything. And wherever you're watching from, whatever city or country or time zone, I want to know you're out there. Because this story isn't really about a diner in Ohio. It's about what happens when the most dependable person in a family finally decides that dependability deserves to be a 2-way street.